True. I think this will be a super quick one. We are just going to take a look at what it takes to send an email alert when the sale price goes below the cost price. This title is too long, but this is the idea. We're going to monitor updates to products, and we're just going to send a quick email when we discover that the cost ever drops below the price that it is sold at. Now, this is a sample of what the product update data looks like, and this will all be available in event.data, but also in the product object that's made available for us for free when we're writing our Liquid script. And as we're looking here, we should see a cost somewhere, unless it is stored somewhere that I'm not anticipating. Let's learn about this real quick. Pretty sure it's a part of the product API. Oh, maybe it's the inventory item. Okay. So taking a quick look here, it looks like it might be a property that I can only access through GraphQL. Let's verify this in two places. First, by taking a look at the product API here. And once this loads, we'll search for cost, and I don't see anything. Instead, we're going to hop over to the Shopify graphical app, and this is a graphical interface to GraphQL. It's awesome. And we are going to take a look at our orders. Our first 5. If I hit Command Enter, it's going to pre-fill all this stuff. All right, sweet. So that quick Googling that I did hints to me that we're going to find this on the inventory item for our variant. Is that correct? It is correct. Inventory item cost. Okay, cool. And we're looking at this. Okay, cool. Awesome. So we know that we're going to be looking at properties of the inventory item of the variant related to a given product. So just thinking about what we're going to need to do in response to a product update. We're going to be querying for a specific product, and I can give myself an example product ID by heading over to our products area, snagging whatever we've got here. Come on, there we go. Head back over here, and we'll turn this from a products query into a product query. Okay, and then we can drop immediately to our variants. Cool. Okay, awesome. Let's add a cost to this, so we're looking at something that, is reasonable. So, okay, my bad. $5 price, and the cost, I swear, yeah, right here. Let's just say the projected margin is negative 100%. Cool, that's perfect. So if I save this, and if I hit enter here, I should see, or command enter, I now see my cost. I'm also interested in retrieving the price for this particular variant. Yeah, 5. This is going to come back. It's actually interesting to me that this is just a straight up dollar value or currency value without a currency code, but that's fine. This will always be in the store's currency, I believe, so that's fine with me. And yeah, this is going to be what we're retrieving. So I'm going to copy all this, and in practice, we'll jack that up to its maximum, 250. We're going to head over to this area here, and we'll begin. So when you're using GraphQL in Shopify, in mechanics specifically, we begin by capturing the query as a string, and then we continue by piping the query itself through the Shopify filter and assigning that to a variable, like this. And we can sub this out for the admin GraphQL API ID of our particular product. We can verify this in a couple of ways. We can begin first by taking a look at our example payload that we're using here. And we see that we have an admin GraphQL API ID not only for our variant, but also for our product. Perfect. Okay, cool. Now the reason that we're not seeing, well, we don't know this yet, but if I were to echo the result of this, action echo result, we would see that we get back null instead of any actual data. That's because during task preview, access to Shopify API is disallowed. So for the purposes of our preview, I'm actually, and this will make more sense in just a second, I'm going to copy this example response from Shopify for my demo store. I'm going to say if event.preview and we'll put this in here. Close that brace. Come on. And there we go, cool. So this is important for two reasons. One, we're proving the concept here. We always want to have something over here that demonstrates to mechanic and to the merchant what the task is likely to do. Now, in this case, this echo is not something that we're actually going to have in the final task. We want this in place here with actual functional data for our preview in the result variable, because we're going to be testing the result variable in order to generate the actions that actually send off an email. Remember, our purpose here is to send an email when the sale price goes below the cost price. So what we're doing is going to say for variant, let's give ourselves more breathing room here. We're going to be looping through all the variants that come back from GraphQL and then testing their unit cost versus their price. And now that we actually have result data here, the results of our test will be visible in the preview pane for our task. So what we can say is for variant edge in result.data.product.variance.edges. And that traversal right here comes directly from here, data, products, variants, edges. And now here's where we can do our test. We can say if, let's see, variant edge.node.inventory item.unit cost.amount. Now here's the thing, these are both strings. I actually want to cast these to a number of some kind of float, I guess, so that we can do mathematical comparison instead of doing string comparison. So I'm going to say assign unit cost equal, wow, this keyboard is not happy. Assign unit cost equals this times 1. This is a nice, easy way to convert from a string, a numeric string, into an actual numeric type. So we've got our unit cost, and then we've also got our sale cost, I suppose, which will be a property of the node of this particular variant edge, and that's just going to be the price times 1. So now we can say if the sale cost is smaller than the unit cost, and here's where we send off our email. And to generate that, I'm going to pop down here and hit the email action button, and that's going to generate this thing for me. One more time. And now already we should see an email pop up, yep, right here. And that's because the data that we're getting back as part of this stub data within our event preview block matches our test case. We have an actual amount, a unit cost amount that is greater than the price. If I were to change the price upward, this email would go away because the data no longer reflects a scenario in which we need to send an email. So this gives us a really easy way to test our logic and our entire logic without even leaving the task editor. We can see the results and prove the results right over here in the preview pane. So that's perfect. Next thing we want to do is say, to whom will we send this email? Options.recipient email. And by throwing a double underscore on the end and then adding a set of underscore separated flags, we communicate to mechanic what exactly we want to do with this field. If we were to remove this entirely, this would be an optional normal string. But now, this way, not only is it a required field, but if I were to fill in a non-email, the browser itself would yell at me because it's not a valid email address. So that's perfect. We want to say, options.email subject. So we can do one of two things with our email subject and body. We can either hard code this as part of the task script itself, or we can make them configurable pieces up here. So for example, if we were to say, sure, we can use my email address, By making this an option up here, this is going to be naturally the subject that is actually sent out with this email. The downside of this is that it becomes a little bit more difficult to customize the email subject with data that pertains to the results of our findings down here. So while I could say product.title, and that would be totally fine, there's no trivial way for me to say within this subject configuration which variants are actually problematic. So I am probably going to take the route of setting the email subject and body down here so that we can be really precise about what information we include in both. So let's take a second to build that up. And as long as I'm thinking about the actual content, we need to consider that it's totally possible for multiple variants to qualify for this email, which makes me wonder again if we should be sending out one email per variant that is found to have an inappropriate price structure, or if we should be sending one email per product listing out all the variants that are problematic. So the person who mentioned this scenario talked about wanting to keep a particular team up to date when the pricing falls out of balance like this. If I'm on that team, I'm going to imagine that it might be more useful to have one email per qualifying variant so that I could forward a particular variant's email around, and I don't know, like an individually sourced SKU might be something that's more useful to reason about individually than a bunch of SKUs belonging to a certain product. This is totally a gut level reasoning thing on my part. And if the merchant wants to handle this differently, that's totally fine. But for our purposes, that logic and that feeling makes sense to me, so I'm going to do it this way. All right, email subject. This variable doesn't exist yet, but it will, as will this. So the email body, now let's begin with the subject. And capture. What do we want to call this? Let's keep this fast because this is also easy to change later on. I want to use the SKU for this variant, which means that I actually need to query for it as well, which means that I'm going to go back here and, yep, SKU is the thing that I want. Perfect. In our case, it's blank, which is less great, or in the case of our test store data. Let's put this up here. ID SKU price, perfect. And then our SKU is going to be returned here. Okay. So variant edge.node.sku. We need a default though. Variant title maybe? Yeah. And then there are going to be cases when it's default title, which means that we need to, in that case, use the product title. So this is going to be slightly more problematic. Variant, we'll call it that. Variant edge.node.title, because we are also querying for that now. And that will make more sense in just a second. Okay. So now I want to say if variant name default title is the default title used for the scenarios in which there is only one variant per product. So in this case, it's more appropriate to say that the variant name should be the product's title. All right, having calculated all that information, we're going to say the variant name was priced lower than its cost, and that will be the email subject. Now, I used default title for our test value or our preview value right here because I want to prove something about how this works. So in our case, we do have a skew in our previous stub data, which means that the skew comes back right here. If I were to remove that though, we want to prove, yep, there we go, that we don't use default title, but instead that we use the products title. And now I can trivially prove as well that if that value change, we do use that value here as well. Perfect. Everything is working well. This principle is really important, and I know I'm nailing it pretty, or like I'm hammering it pretty hard. But when you're writing mechanic task, having preview stub data that you can trivially tweak in order to prove your results is super useful and cuts down a whole bunch on the support cost down the road when you're working with merchants who have feedback about how the thing is working. This just increases overall reliability of the task by a whole lot. Okay, cool. So we've got that going on here. Let's produce our email body really quickly. Capture email body. How do I want to say this? Just do this again. Was found to have a unit cost of this. And we'll talk about formatting here in just a second. Sale cost. I want to call this price instead. Yeah, I'm going to call it that. Just need a protocol. So the product ID comes from the product variable. We also need a variant ID here. And the variant ID comes from, we'll have to query for that too. So technically we could extract it from here, but that's generally regarded as poor form. We want instead the legacy resource ID, because we should not be assuming that this string, considered to be opaque, has anything to do with this string. So we're also going to pull back our legacy ID, and it occurs to me that we actually don't need to query for our ID at all, just our legacy resource ID. So let's replace this with legacy resource ID. And I generally like to replace this with data that is not specifically tied to my demo store. Okay. Manage this variant, manage this product, this in Shopify. That's close enough. Okay, and we'll say thanks. Okay. All right, now our email body is being converted to JSON straight up, so all we have is a string. And Mechanic's email action accepts HTML instead. So what we're going to do is do two things. First, we're going to unindent, and this is a filter that's specific to Mechanic. This isn't included in Shopify's storefront liquid implementation, for example. We're going to unindent, and then we're going to convert line breaks, or new lines, to line break tags. And now we have something that actually looks like actual HTML, or an actual properly intentionally formatted email. We've got some leading white space here, so for that we're going to strip, and there we go. Hello, ABC. Perfect, perfect. Awesome. We're in really good shape. Yeah, and checking this URL, and I'm hovering over Mechanic demo, admin, products. Wonderful. Okay. All right, we are all set. I'm quite happy with how all of this looks, and I've proved to my satisfaction that all of this logic and email construction works based on what's happening up here. However, it's always good to do an actual proper live test. So I'm going to hit save. Now I have to grant access because before Mechanic didn't have access to product data, and Mechanic uses a combination of scanning the liquid that you write in your task script plus the generated actions plus what happens right here in your subscriptions in order to ask you for appropriate permissions. So now what we're going to do is say, all right, our product, here it is. Our product is now going to have a cost per item of, we're just going to make the situation worse, $15. And then over here, in just a second, we should see in our recent activity an event coming in from Shopify reflecting the product update and then the decisions that the task actually makes. And we've got some flickering here. That's because we're actually hiding events that did nothing and the event didn't do anything yet. But it has now. An update occurred for short sleeve t-shirt a few seconds ago. If I click on this, we'll see that we did send off an email which looks like this. This link goes to just testing, goes to a place that we want it to go. Is that right? Yep. And Shopify actually redirected us because there is only one variant per product. That's nice, actually. I'm happy that we discovered that that's a thing. All right, we'll head back here. And then the next thing that I want to test is that we don't send an email if we don't need to. So if the price suddenly goes up $50 down from, or relative to a cost per item of 15%, I want to prove that that update doesn't send any emails. So let's see what happens now. And updates, oh, there we go, perfect. And nothing happened because there was nothing that needed to happen. We are all set. I'm going to go put this in our task library and yeah, have a fantastic day.